By 1786, post-Revolutionary War America was on the verge of economic collapse. Everywhere, businesses were closing, and debt was running rampant. Most were unable to pay their debts, and were thrown into prison where they suffered in horrible conditions. The state governments were teetering on the verge of bankruptcy, and had instituted a policy of heavy taxation. The federal government was helpless to solve these problems because it had been given no political power. In western Massachusetts, Daniel Shays and his followers had been speaking out against the state government's policies, but their entreaties had fallen on deaf ears. They decided they had to take action.
The Shaysites saw the courts as their enemies. They viewed the courts as instruments of their eastern creditors, of those people from Boston. And so that's when the Shaysites began to see the courts not as their salvation, but as their damnation.
On September 29th, 1786, a boiling point was reached. As the court prepared to convene, 1,000 men came out of the wilderness on a hill above Springfield, Massachusetts. Shays now unsheathed his sword and ordered the fife and drum players to strike up a tune. The men began marching in cadence, sprigs of hemlock swaying on their heads as they held their weapons tightly.
The rebels marched on the debtor courts with muskets. Many of them had guns. They also had clubs. They brought whatever was convenient or available to them.
In troubled times, however, when there was fear of violence, the militia would attend the court proceedings in order to provide greater strength and authority.
Jonathan Judd, one of the 900 government militiamen who stood inside the court building, recorded the events.
A sorrowful day. Brother against brother, father against son, militia at the courthouse, and mob above the ferry. The mob threatened the lives of all who opposed them.
The insurgents, they were ready to attack the government militia.
Calling upon his experience in the Revolutionary War, Shays had his men make a show of loading their muskets. As soon as the weapons were loaded, Shays charged with his men in a fury toward the courthouse. Their mission was to shut down the courts by any means necessary.
And at that point, the judges adjourned the court without doing any business.
As long as the courts were shut down, none of the western farmers could be sent to jail for their debts. It was the first major victory for Shays and his men, who became known as Shaysites. This rebel army carried out numerous attacks across New England over the next few months. Shays and his men closed courts in Northampton, Concord, and Worcester. As 1786 progressed, the uprising attracted nearly 9,000 rebels spread across New England. As word of these attacks reached Boston, many wealthy businessmen became distraught with the growing rebellion. Samuel Adams decided to speak out.
Rebellion against a king may be pardoned, but the man who dares rebel against the laws of the Republic ought to suffer death!